everybody, today we'll be looking at Battlefront 2 and seeing if it's a game that anyone can run with some old hardware. Pretty much what I'm going to be doing is showing you guys a bunch of resolutions, which are just 4K, 1080p, and 720p on the older gen card that I have, the weakest card that I have, and I'll be showing you guys the following three GPUs, starting off with the GTX 780, the old champion of the day. Even though it has aged a bit, it's still decent. Moving on to the much older mid-range R9 270. Thing's showing its age, but it's still buckling right along. Jesus, whoa, that was a tongue twister, or not. And finally, let's move on to the weakest card of the day. A very low-end card that came out years ago, and that is the GT 730. Do we expect much from the GT 730? No, we do not. But we're still putting in here just to see how well the game can actually scale from the low to the high. So, let's get into the game. Starting off at 1080p at medium settings, look at that. We're at 80 FPS. That is beyond playable, guys. You are above 60 the entire time. This was both in the campaign, which I used to benchmark, and in multiplayer, the FPS was roughly about the same, maybe just a few frames lower on some of the bigger maps. But in terms of 1080p medium, the game runs perfectly well. You could even put up the graphics a tiny little bit, and still probably get above 60 very easily. Now, when I bumped it up to 4K, well, 4K medium didn't work out that well. The game is not playable at this frame rate, and even if you wanted to play at this frame rate just to have the nice shiny graphics, why would you? You're not going to have fun or anything else. And it just goes to show you the 780 is not really a 4K card, especially when it comes to more modern games. Older games will run 4K perfectly fine on the 780 at very good frames, but newer games, not so much. When we bumped it down and low, well, the frame rate is a lot more playable at this point, and you could definitely play it, I guess. If you're a fan of above 30 but not 60, then it's doable. Now, I went ahead and did something also, and I overclocked the card, and barely anything. Getting 200 on the core and an extra 300 on the memory didn't do much. It moved it by, what, 2 frames? That's not really going to make... Is that going to make a difference? Maybe. It was a pretty big overclock, but it just shows you at 4K the card's just not that good. This card also only has 3 gigs of VRAM because, NVIDIA, 3 gigs of VRAM is perfectly fine in their book for a high-end card back in 2014, but whatever. You know what? It shows nowadays the issues that it causes. But enough of that. Let's move on to another sort of kind of beast in its day, the R9 270. Now, this card, whoa. It was actually pretty decent. You are getting practically almost 60 FPS. You are at lower settings, but it's doable. It's definitely playable. And for a card that was pretty much a kind of budget GPU back in its day, it's still doing pretty well. And it just goes to show you having a mid-range card from a few years ago can still prove to be decent about 4 or 5 years later. So yeah, the card works well, and you're going to be playing it pretty well. I did not overclock the card. Sadly, the R9 270 that I have, any form of overclock absolutely murders the card. It seems that even a single, 1 megahertz up decides that it's going to freeze up. It's an old card. It's been through a lot, so I'm not kind of surprised, but yeah. If you're also wondering how I've been benchmarking it, you can go ahead and play through the first 5 campaign missions. That is basically what I have used for benchmarking various sections, basically just doing them over and over again and pretty much just averaging that up. And how am I playing the game? Well, I'm using the EA 10-hour trial, and also, 4K by the way, on the R9 270. Horrendous. Horrendous. Don't even try it. If the 780 can't do it, the R9 270 can't. So, let's move on to our last card, guys. That'll be the GT 730. The GT 730, whoa, okay, we're above 30, we're not even close to 60. I guess the game scales well. So, you could play it on the GT 730, or if you have a card around that performance level. It is above 30, and kind of smooth, I guess. I'm not a big fan of playing around 30, but hey, it's definitely doable. And if you want to play the game on a weak computer, you definitely could. Would I recommend playing it on an Intel HD computer from a few years ago? No! In fact, hopefully it doesn't even support DirectX 11, so you can't even play it. Yeah. But guys, overall, this just shows that if you have an old GPU, you can still play the game. You're just going to have to drop down some settings. It's not really going to be much of an issue. The Frostbite engine does scale very well from the high to the low, where even the 780 and the R9 270 weren't that much of a difference, to be honest. And hey, it's highly playable. Go ahead and take your old system and just play the game. There's no need to upgrade unless you're very far behind, or if you're a fan of 120 frames and extremely high graphics, then of course upgrade. Or just overclock with liquid nitrogen. And then figure out that you're, well, maybe if you're rich, you could do that year round. I don't know if that'd be bad for the card. It probably would. But you could do that too. You could just overclock. Don't forget, overclocking is always an option. Maybe not with liquid nitrogen, but if you want to get extra frames, you definitely could. At the end of the day, the game is pretty beautiful no matter what settings you do. The game's pretty fun. Is it Battlefront 2 like the original? No, it's a very different playstyle kind of, and it feels more like Battlefield, kind of mixed with Battlefront, but hey, it's still fun at the end of the day, and whip out your old PC and go ahead and play it. So anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Go ahead and like, subscribe, and comment if you did. If you didn't, then you don't have to do any of that. In fact, there's even a dislike button, if you really disliked it, which please don't do that, but if you really did, you could click that too. It's an option. It's a free country if you live in the US. If not, then the world's mostly free, sort of, kind of. Maybe it's not. It's still gonna need a lot of years, but yeah, moral of the story is, guys, no matter what country you're in, you can play Battlefront 2, I'm guessing. Unless it's been banned in some country. Maybe I'll just keep contradicting myself to the end of this video. But anyways, yeah, check out my other vids. See you later. Have a great day.